Have you ever wondered how does high volume and complex air traffic being managed? And who is managing all the aircraft up in the sky? So this video is going to tell you about how ATC operates and how they manage all the aircraft up in the air. First of all, in order to manage air traffic, we need to have an organization, which is ANSP. ANSP stands for Air Navigation Service Provider. And in Australia, the only ANSP is Air Service Australia. They service four main customer groups: airlines and commercial aircraft operators, general aviation aircraft, airports, and defense forces. They have two main responsibilities. The first one, air traffic management. They need to manage aircraft traffic flow and the airspace they are looking after for. The second, air traffic control, both in the air and on the ground. They need to coordinate air traffic in airspace mainly through ATC or air traffic controller, and separate aircraft as they fly in and out, also at airports, such as takeoff and landings, as well as separate aircraft during en route. In Australia, there are two air traffic control centers which guide aircraft to and from terminal areas around airports. They are Melbourne and Brisbane FIR. FIR stands for Flight Information Region, and between the two, they control 11% of the world's airspace. Next, let's talk about types of controller. ATC is divided into various surface areas, defined by the different demands for controlling individual phase of a flight. There are three types of ATC. The first one, tower controller, which they are responsible for all airport surface movements, such as taxi, takeoff, and landings. They are located at the airport's control tower. The second one, approach controller. They are responsible for all terminal departure and arrival, such as ascent, descent, and approach. They are located at the control center. The last one, en route controller. They are responsible for all the airspace outside of tower and approach, including continental and oceanic roads. They are located at the control center as well. This is how ATC manage all the air traffic by dividing them into different phases. Isn't it cool? Let's talk about airspace categories. There are two kinds of airspace in civil aviation: controlled airspace and uncontrolled airspace. Controlled airspace is actively monitored by ATC and is broken up into different classes, like Class A, C, D, and E. Different rules will apply to different classes, like how far and how high you can fly. Aircraft pilots must first gain a clearance from ATC to enter controlled airspace. Uncontrolled airspace is the airspace where ATC do not provide aircraft separation service. Aircraft may not be visible to ATC, and it might be located underneath or adjacent to a controlled airspace. So, does it mean all aircraft flying in an uncontrolled airspace will not looked after by ATC? Let's invite Dr. Nic Connelly, which she had over 30 years of experience being an air traffic controller. Tell us more about uncontrolled airspace.
So the aircraft is divided up by alphabet numbers. So anything in Class G airspace, it's called, is uncontrolled airspace. But that doesn't mean that the air traffic controller is not monitoring it. All airspace is monitored, but the air traffic controller doesn't have to separate aircraft in uncontrolled airspace. It just monitors it, and it might give, depending on where and what type of flight rules you're flying under, you might get traffic information or weather advisory. So depending on, one, the class of airspace, and two, whether your instrument or visual flight rules, that determines what service the controller has to give to you.
Moving on to the parts of aircraft separation. When we talk about separation in air traffic control, there is a term called Seperation Standards, which is a criteria used by ATC to determine the required spacing to achieve safety between aircraft. Separation means by distance apart in the vertical or horizontal plane. A fundamental distinction in the way separation is achieved is between flight under official flight rules and instrument flight rules. For example, in Australia, aircraft flying with instrument flight rules in a controlled airspace up to 29,000 feet, the vertical separation need to be 1,000 feet, and the horizontal separation need to be 5 nautical miles. And for aircraft flying under official flight rules, it depends on where aircraft are flying, and usually adopt see and avoid rules. For general aviation aircraft outside of controlled airspace, the separation standard is 500 feet vertically and horizontally. How do ATC manage to separate aircraft though? What methods they are using? Are they just eyeball it, or using radar or something else? So, methods used to achieve separation depends on various conditions, such as the phase of a flight, the relative trajectories of the aircraft involved, the technology in use, and the local terrain conditions. For example, procedural separation based on pilot reports to estimate aircraft positions. It used in airspace not monitored by radar or any navigation equipment. It uses of various procedural rules, including time and estimated position. However, radar or nav-based separation use of radar or aircraft system such as ADSB to manage and separate aircraft. It's the most efficient way to separate aircraft nowadays. It's used in major airports predominantly, including Melbourne Airport. It could help increase volume and complexity of air traffic. Thanks for watching.